I woke up as the novel's forgotten Omega. Then the Alpha King saw me with his Divine Serpent. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, we have one small favor to ask. Please subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. It only takes a moment. It is completely free, and it is one of the best ways to support our channel as we continue bringing you more emotional, dramatic, and unforgettable stories like this one. Your support truly means everything to us. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is in your part of the world right now. We always love seeing how far these stories travel and meeting viewers from every corner of the globe. Now let us begin today's story. Sometimes the person everyone forgets is the one destiny has been waiting for all along. The first thing I noticed was the silence. It was the kind of silence that settled over a place where no one expected to find anyone worth remembering. My eyes slowly opened to a small bedroom filled with faded afternoon light, worn wooden furniture, and a single narrow window overlooking the distant towers of an enormous royal palace. None of it looked familiar, yet memories that did not belong to me flooded my mind before I could even sit up. My name was now Lucien Everhart. At least, that was the name this world had given me. Only hours ago, I had been an ordinary reader finishing a fantasy novel that left me frustrated because one mysterious Omega appeared briefly before disappearing from the story without explanation. He had no meaningful dialogue, no heroic ending, and no place in the final chapters. He was simply forgotten. Somehow, impossibly, I had awakened inside that very Omega. My heart sank as the truth settled in. This was not the powerful protagonist. This was not even an important supporting character. I had become the person the original author barely acknowledged. The inherited memories were painfully quiet. Lucien had spent most of his life living in a distant wing of the Everhart estate, where servants rarely visited and relatives rarely spoke his name. He had never caused trouble, yet no one celebrated his birthdays, invited him to family gatherings, or asked what dreams he carried in his heart. Existing had become his greatest accomplishment because almost everyone behaved as though he were invisible. A gentle knock interrupted my thoughts before the bedroom door slowly opened. An elderly maid entered carrying a simple tray with warm tea and fresh bread. The moment she saw me sitting upright, relief softened her tired eyes. "You are awake," she whispered kindly. "I was afraid your fever might return." Fever. According to Lucien's memories, he had collapsed the previous evening after working alone in the estate gardens. No physician had been called because no one believed his condition deserved attention. I thanked the maid, surprising both of us. She hesitated for a moment before smiling with quiet warmth, as though kindness had become something unfamiliar inside this lonely house. After finishing breakfast, I wandered through the estate, determined to understand the world I had entered. Lavish halls displayed portraits of respected family members, but Lucien's picture appeared nowhere. Servants politely stepped aside without truly noticing me. Even passing relatives looked through me instead of at me. It felt as though the novel itself had taught everyone to ignore the forgotten Omega. Later that afternoon, the entire estate prepared to welcome distinguished guests arriving from the royal capital. Elegant banners decorated the entrance. Musicians rehearsed beneath marble archways, and every noble family gathered in anticipation of one honored visitor. The Alpha King himself had accepted an invitation to attend the annual royal ceremony. Remembering the novel, I knew his name immediately. Cassian Ashford. Wise, respected, and known throughout the kingdom for his extraordinary judgment. According to the original story, he was never supposed to notice Lucien at all. Hoping to avoid unnecessary attention, I quietly slipped into the palace gardens surrounding the estate, where towering white flowers swayed beneath the afternoon breeze. The peaceful silence calmed my racing thoughts until I sensed something strange behind me. The air suddenly grew warm without becoming uncomfortable. Leaves rustled, although no wind touched the branches. Slowly, I turned around. Rising gracefully from the shadows stood an enormous serpent unlike anything I had ever imagined. Its brilliant white scales shimmered with soft silver light. Its golden eyes held remarkable intelligence, and delicate patterns resembling flowing constellations glowed across its body. Despite its breathtaking size, I felt no fear. Instead, an overwhelming sense of peace settled over my heart. as though the mysterious creature had been waiting for me far longer than I had been searching for answers. Before I could take another breath, footsteps echoed from the garden entrance. I looked up just as Alpha King Cassian Ashford stepped through the flowering archway. His calm expression disappeared the instant his eyes met mine, then shifted beyond me toward the radiant serpent standing faithfully at my side. Everyone else continued walking without reacting to anything unusual, but the king's quiet voice carried unmistakable astonishment as he whispered, "How can you be the only one standing beside the Divine Serpent?" King Cassian's quiet question lingered in the garden long after the last note of the musicians faded from the distant courtyard. I instinctively turned around once more, but the magnificent white serpent remained exactly where it had been only a moment before, its golden eyes watching me with calm intelligence. The strange part was not its appearance. The strange part was everyone else's complete indifference. Noble guests continued strolling through the gardens, servants carried trays of refreshments past us, and children laughed beneath the flowering trees as though nothing extraordinary stood only a few feet away. I looked back at the Alpha King. His expression remained composed, yet unmistakable astonishment lingered in his eyes. "You can see it too?" I asked quietly. Cassian gave a slow nod without taking his gaze away from the serpent. "I believe the Divine Serpent disappeared from this world centuries ago." My heartbeat quickened. According to the novel I remembered, no Divine Serpent had ever appeared. Either the story itself had hidden this secret, or I had unknowingly changed the original timeline simply by existing inside Lucien's body. The serpent slowly lowered its graceful head toward me before brushing the air near my shoulder with remarkable gentleness. Instead of fear, an unexpected warmth spread through my chest. Faint silver light briefly shimmered beneath the creature's brilliant scales before disappearing into the afternoon sunlight. Cassian noticed the same phenomenon immediately. "It recognizes you," he said softly. "That should not be possible." Before I could ask what he meant, hurried footsteps echoed across the stone pathway. A noblewoman approached the king with an elegant bow, politely informing him that the royal ceremony would begin within minutes. Cassian acknowledged her without taking his attention away from me. "Remain inside the palace after the ceremony," he said in a calm voice. "There are questions that deserve answers." I hesitated before nodding. "I will." As the Alpha King walked back toward the grand hall, he glanced over his shoulder one final time. For the briefest moment, I noticed his eyes following the serpent instead of me. The instant he disappeared beyond the marble archway, the Divine Serpent slowly lifted its head toward the sky. Its enormous form dissolved into thousands of tiny silver lights that drifted gently through the air before settling against the back of my right hand. When the final light disappeared, a delicate silver mark resembling intertwined scales remained upon my skin. It did not hurt. Instead, it felt strangely familiar. Startled, I quickly pulled down my sleeve before anyone else could notice. The remainder of the afternoon passed in uneasy silence. During the royal ceremony, I stood quietly near the edge of the magnificent ballroom where, just as Lucien's memories predicted, almost no one acknowledged my presence. Relatives greeted influential nobles with bright smiles while walking directly past me without introducing me to a single guest. Yet something had quietly changed. Every few minutes I caught King Cassian looking toward me from across the room, his expression thoughtful rather than curious. It was not admiration. It was recognition, as though he had remembered something everyone else had forgotten. That evening, after the celebration finally ended, I returned to the small bedroom expecting another lonely night. Instead, I discovered a neatly folded envelope resting upon the windowsill beside a single white flower that had not been there before. The envelope carried no royal seal and no family crest. Only one sentence had been written across the front in elegant silver ink. "The forgotten pages can only be found by the one history refused to remember." The mysterious sentence written across the envelope remained in my thoughts throughout the night. I turned it over several times beneath the soft glow of a bedside candle, but there was no seal, no signature, and no clue revealing who had placed it inside my room. Even stranger, the white flower resting beside it had not wilted despite hours passing since sunset. Its delicate petals shimmered faintly whenever the silver mark hidden beneath my sleeve grew warm. Taking a slow breath, I carefully opened the envelope. Inside rested a single sheet of aged parchment and what appeared to be a torn page from an old book. The paper felt older than anything I had ever touched, yet the ink remained remarkably clear. Across the top, elegant handwriting read, "Chapter that was never meant to be remembered." My pulse quickened. I immediately recognized the style. It matched the novel I had read before awakening inside this world. Yet I had never seen this chapter. As my eyes moved across the faded words, the forgotten story slowly unfolded before me. It described an Omega whose name had been erased from official records after an ancient council feared a prophecy tied to the royal bloodline. The forgotten Omega possessed no extraordinary strength, no political influence, and no desire for power. Instead, he carried something considered even more dangerous. He alone could awaken the Divine Serpent, the eternal guardian who recognized only the soul of the true lost prince. I froze. Beneath the final paragraph, someone had drawn the exact silver symbol now hidden on the back of my hand. Before I could read further, footsteps approached outside my bedroom. I quickly folded the page and slipped it inside my jacket just as a gentle knock sounded at the door. The elderly maid entered carrying breakfast with her usual warm smile. "You have a visitor," she said softly. "A royal messenger has arrived." My surprise only deepened when I stepped into the entrance hall. Waiting there stood one of the Alpha King's trusted attendants dressed in an elegant navy uniform embroidered with the royal crest. He bowed respectfully before presenting a small invitation sealed with silver wax. "His Majesty requests your presence at the Royal Library this afternoon," he announced. No formal audience. No ceremony. Only a private conversation. The surrounding servants exchanged bewildered glances the moment they heard those words. None of them could understand why someone as insignificant as Lucien Everhart would receive a personal invitation from the Alpha King himself. Neither could I. Several hours later, I arrived at the Royal Library, a magnificent building whose towering shelves disappeared into a ceiling painted with constellations and flowering vines. King Cassian was already waiting beside a long oak table covered with ancient manuscripts. Instead of greeting me immediately, he quietly placed an old leather-bound volume before me. "Open it," he said. Curious, I turned to the final pages. Every chapter was present except one. The last section had been carefully removed years ago, leaving only uneven edges where several pages had once existed. My heart nearly stopped. The torn page hidden inside my jacket fit those missing edges perfectly. Before I could reveal what I had discovered, a soft rustling sound echoed through the silent library. The silver mark on my hand grew warm once again. At the far end of the room, between rows of forgotten books, the magnificent Divine Serpent slowly emerged from the shadows, its golden eyes fixed not on me this time, but on an ancient stone door covered with symbols that had remained sealed for centuries. Cassian followed its gaze and whispered with quiet certainty, "The library is hiding more than books. It has been protecting the forgotten history of the lost prince all along." The ancient stone door remained perfectly still beneath the watchful gaze of the Divine Serpent, yet the atmosphere inside the royal library had completely changed. The quiet room that had once felt like a place for scholars now carried the solemn weight of forgotten history waiting to awaken. Cassian slowly approached the weathered entrance, carefully studying the intricate carvings that covered its surface. Instead of symbols celebrating kings or battles, the stone displayed graceful images of blooming flowers, flowing rivers, and countless hands reaching toward one another across bridges of light. Every carving seemed to tell the same story without using a single written word. True strength had never been born from conquest. It had always begun with trust. "This seal has existed longer than our kingdom," Cassian said quietly. "Generations of royal historians believed it could never be opened." I looked down at the torn page hidden inside my jacket before carefully placing it beside the ancient volume resting on the oak table. The missing edges aligned perfectly, leaving no doubt that both pieces had once belonged together. As soon as they touched, the faded ink shimmered with gentle silver light. The mark beneath my sleeve grew warm once again, and the Divine Serpent slowly glided toward the stone entrance with calm certainty. It lowered its magnificent head until the tip of its nose rested against the center of the seal. Nothing happened for several long seconds. Then the silver mark upon my hand began glowing through the fabric of my sleeve. Delicate lines of light spread across the stone door like flowing streams, connecting symbols that had remained dark for centuries. Cassian watched the transformation in silent amazement. The library was never protecting knowledge alone, he whispered. It was protecting someone. A soft chime echoed through the chamber as the heavy door slowly separated without the sound of grinding stone. Beyond it stretched a hidden circular archive illuminated by countless floating crystals suspended beneath a domed ceiling painted with stars unlike any constellation visible in the modern sky. Shelves, carved from white marble, surrounded the room. Yet instead of ordinary books, they held crystal tablets glowing with faint silver light. At the center stood a single pedestal supporting an elegant crown woven entirely from white branches and tiny blossoms. It appeared almost weightless, radiating quiet warmth instead of authority. Drawn by an instinct I could not explain, I stepped closer. The moment my fingertips brushed the edge of the pedestal, countless points of light gathered above it, forming the image of a young figure dressed in flowing silver robes. His gentle smile carried neither sadness nor pride. It carried recognition. "Welcome," he said softly. The pages they removed could never erase the truth. My heart pounded as I realized I was looking at the very lost prince whose existence had been erased from history. Before I could speak, the figure turned toward Cassian with calm respect. "Guardian King, thank you for choosing compassion before certainty." Cassian lowered his head instinctively, as though greeting someone he had somehow known all his life. The luminous figure then looked back at me. "You were never forgotten because you lacked value. You were hidden because your kindness carried the power to restore what fear divided." As his final words settled across the silent chamber, the Divine Serpent gently coiled beside the pedestal, and one crystal tablet slowly drifted free from its shelf before floating toward my hands. Across its glowing surface, a single title appeared in brilliant silver letters: "The First Chronicle of the Lost Prince." The crystal tablet felt unexpectedly warm the moment it settled into my hands. Instead of cold stone, its smooth surface resembled polished glass illuminated from within by gentle silver light. As my fingertips rested against the glowing symbols, the words slowly rearranged themselves into a language I somehow understood without ever studying it. The first chronicle did not begin with kings, wars, or royal decrees. It began with a promise. Long before the modern kingdoms existed, the Divine Serpent had chosen to protect a single bloodline whose purpose was never to rule the world, but to preserve harmony. Whenever fear threatened to divide it, the lost prince was not the heir to a throne. He was the keeper of compassion, entrusted with awakening the goodness already hidden within every heart. The more I read, the clearer everything became. Every generation remembered the guardian families because they stood in public view, yet the lost prince was deliberately hidden whenever ambition overshadowed kindness. History had erased the prince's name not because he had failed, but because those who desired power feared a leader who inspired loyalty without demanding obedience. I slowly lowered the crystal tablet, struggling to absorb everything I had learned. "So the Divine Serpent never belonged to the royal family," I whispered. The luminous figure smiled gently. "No. It has always chosen the soul carrying the ancient promise. It protects without commanding, guides without controlling, and remains invisible until the proper time arrives." Beside the pedestal, the magnificent serpent quietly lifted its graceful head before slowly approaching me. Every movement reflected extraordinary patience rather than overwhelming strength. As it came closer, I noticed that each brilliant white scale carried delicate patterns resembling stars scattered across a peaceful night sky. Instead of fear, I felt the same comforting warmth that had surrounded me since our first meeting in the palace garden. The Divine Serpent lowered its head until our foreheads nearly touched. A gentle silver glow spread between us before flowing across the hidden chamber like soft morning sunlight. Crystal tablets lining the marble shelves answered with their own faint radiance, illuminating forgotten stories preserved for countless generations. Cassian watched the remarkable scene with quiet admiration. "I spent my entire life believing the greatest rulers protected their people through authority," he said softly. "Now I understand that true protection begins with trust." The luminous figure turned toward him with calm approval. "That is why you alone could see the Divine Serpent when no one else could." Your heart recognized what your eyes had never been taught to expect. Those words seemed to lift an invisible burden from Cashin's shoulders. He looked toward me with a warmth that no longer carried curiosity alone. It carried respect. For the first time since awakening inside Lucien's forgotten life, I no longer felt invisible. I felt seen for who I truly was rather than for the place history had assigned to me. The Divine Serpent gently circled us once before resting peacefully beside the pedestal, its golden eyes quietly observing the chamber. Suddenly, the crystal tablet in my hands displayed a new image. A detailed map slowly appeared across its glowing surface, revealing an ancient sanctuary hidden far beyond the royal capital beneath a valley surrounded by white forests and flowing rivers. One location pulsed with brilliant silver light, while several others remained dark, waiting silently across distant lands. The luminous figure followed my gaze and spoke with gentle certainty. The first chronicle remembers what history forgot, but it is only the beginning. Each sanctuary preserves another forgotten truth, and only together can they reveal why the lost prince was hidden from the world. As the final words echoed through the chamber, the silver mark on the back of my hand glowed brighter than ever before, and somewhere beyond the library walls, a distant bell rang once across the kingdom, as though another ancient promise had quietly awakened. The distant bell echoed across the kingdom long after its single chime faded into silence. Standing within the hidden archive beneath the royal library, I could still feel the warmth of the crystal tablet resting in my hands. The glowing map upon its surface remained unchanged, yet one silver pathway now shone more brightly than the others, leading beyond the royal capital toward a secluded valley surrounded by ancient white forests. The luminous figure quietly observed my reaction before speaking once more. Every sanctuary remembers a promise. Every promise restores another forgotten truth. The journey ahead will not test your strength. It will test your heart. Those words settled deeply within me because they sounded nothing like the heroic stories I had once enjoyed reading. No prophecy demanded impossible battles. No ancient power required conquest. Everything pointed towards something far simpler and somehow far more difficult. Choosing compassion every time fear offered an easier path. The Divine Serpent slowly circled the glowing pedestal before resting peacefully beside me. Its brilliant white scales reflected the silver light filling the chamber, while its calm golden eyes watched me with unwavering trust. I instinctively reached out, gently brushing my fingertips against one of its smooth scales. Instead of overwhelming power, a quiet warmth spread through my hand before flowing across the silver mark hidden beneath my sleeve. Images immediately filled my thoughts. I saw countless guardians walking beside ordinary families, helping villages rebuild after difficult seasons, teaching children beneath flowering trees, and protecting libraries rather than treasure. Every memory carried the same message. True guardians never ruled above others. They stood beside them. I slowly opened my eyes, realizing only a heartbeat had passed. Cashin noticed the thoughtful expression on my face. "Did you see something?" he asked softly. I nodded. The Divine Serpent showed me memories. None of them were about power. They were about people choosing kindness when no one expected it. Cashin smiled quietly. Then perhaps history remembered the wrong heroes. The luminous figure looked toward the Alpha King with unmistakable approval. "You understand more quickly than many guardians before you. That is why your kingdom still has hope." As we prepared to leave the hidden archive, the crystal tablet gently dissolved into countless points of silver light before merging with the mark on the back of my hand. The first chronicle had not disappeared. Somehow it had become part of me. The ancient stone door behind us slowly closed, sealing the chamber once more. Yet instead of feeling hidden, the forgotten history now felt alive within every step I took. When we emerged into the quiet halls of the royal library, evening sunlight poured through the towering windows, painting the marble floors with soft golden light. Scholars continued reading at nearby tables, completely unaware that centuries of forgotten history had quietly awakened beneath their feet. As Cashin and I walked together toward the main entrance, several royal advisors waiting in the corridor immediately fell silent. Their surprised expressions revealed that seeing the Alpha King walking beside the overlooked Omega challenged everything they believed about status and importance. Cashin remained perfectly calm. He greeted each advisor with his usual dignity before saying something that surprised everyone, including me. From today forward, Lucian Everhart will be my honored guest whenever he enters the royal palace. The advisors exchanged uncertain glances, but respectfully bowed without argument. Once they had departed, I looked toward Cashin in disbelief. You did not have to do that. He met my eyes with quiet sincerity. No, I chose to. His simple answer carried more meaning than any royal decree. For the first time since awakening in this unfamiliar world, I realized someone had chosen to see me not because of destiny, not because of prophecy, but because of who I was becoming. At that very moment, a gentle breeze drifted through the open palace windows carrying the sweet fragrance of blooming white flowers. High above the palace rooftops, unseen by everyone except the two of us, the Divine Serpent soared gracefully across the evening sky before turning its gaze toward the distant valley marked on the ancient map, as though silently reminding us that another forgotten sanctuary was already waiting for our arrival. The following morning arrived beneath a sky painted with pale silver clouds, and for the first time since awakening inside Lucian Everhart's forgotten life, I no longer felt as though I were drifting through someone else's story. The memory of the glowing map, the hidden archive, and the Divine Serpent remained vivid within my mind, yet the greatest change was far quieter. Someone now believed I belonged in this world. As the royal carriage carried Cashin and me beyond the capital, the scenery slowly transformed from bustling streets into peaceful valleys, where crystal rivers reflected the morning light and ancient white forests stretched toward distant mountains. Neither of us hurried the journey. Instead, we shared stories that had nothing to do with prophecies or forgotten kingdoms. Cashin spoke about his childhood, admitting that becoming Alpha King had often felt lonelier than people imagined because every decision affected countless lives. I found myself smiling as I confessed that, before arriving in this world, I had always believed heroes possessed perfect answers. And now, Cashin asked with quiet curiosity. I looked through the carriage window at the rolling hills passing by. Now I think the best leaders simply continue learning. A warm smile appeared on his face. Then you already understand something many rulers never do. By midday we reached the valley marked upon the first chronicle. Unlike the magnificent royal palace, this place welcomed us with remarkable simplicity. Gentle streams wound between flowering meadows, while towering white trees formed natural archways above quiet stone paths. Birds sang softly from the branches, and the air carried the comforting fragrance of cedar and blooming lilies. Waiting near the entrance stood several elderly caretakers dressed in plain white robes. None of them appeared surprised to see us. One elderly woman stepped forward with kind eyes and offered a respectful bow. "The second sanctuary has been waiting for both of you," she said gently. "We simply did not know when you would arrive." As we followed her deeper into the valley, I noticed beautiful stone sculptures lining the pathway. Unlike the statues hidden beneath the royal library, these figures portrayed different guardian families walking beside children, teachers, healers, artists, and travelers. Every sculpture celebrated ordinary acts of compassion rather than extraordinary achievements. Cashin quietly paused before one carving depicting an alpha helping an elderly stranger across a bridge. "There are no monuments to victories," he observed. The caretaker smiled. "Because kindness leaves a longer legacy than triumph." Her answer settled comfortably within the peaceful silence surrounding us. Soon we reached an open sanctuary centered around an enormous flowering tree whose silver leaves shimmered gently despite the absence of any wind. The Divine Serpent gracefully descended from the sky, coiling peacefully around the ancient roots before lowering its head toward the tree with unmistakable reverence. As soon as I stepped beneath its branches, the silver mark upon my hand began glowing once again. Tiny lights emerged from the bark, floating together until they formed hundreds of gentle memories suspended like living stars. Families reunited after years apart. Strangers forgiving old misunderstandings. Villages rebuilding together after difficult seasons. Every vision reflected the same quiet truth. The sanctuaries had never preserved power. They had preserved examples of humanity at its very best. A calm voice echoed from within the glowing tree. The ancient covenant was never written upon stone. It was written within every choice to place another person's dignity beside your own. Cashin slowly reached for my hand, not to guide me or protect me, but simply to remind me that I did not have to face the unknown alone. At that exact moment, the silver lights surrounding the sanctuary gathered high above the flowering tree, revealing the faint outline of an immense circular constellation unlike any visible from the kingdom. The elderly caretaker looked toward the glowing sky with quiet wonder before whispering, "The forgotten covenant is remembering itself, and the path to the final truth has begun to awaken." The silver constellation remained suspended above the sanctuary long after the final rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the mountains. Every glowing point seemed connected by invisible threads stretching far beyond the valley, forming a pattern no historian had recorded and no astronomer had ever recognized. I stood beneath the ancient flowering tree, unable to look away. The light did not feel distant. It felt familiar, as though it had quietly waited for countless generations until someone finally remembered how to see it again. The elderly caretaker slowly approached, her gentle smile reflecting neither surprise nor fear. "Every sanctuary preserves a different memory," she said softly. "The first remembered identity. The second remembered compassion. The final memory has always waited beyond the stars." Her words echoed through the peaceful valley while the divine serpent lifted its graceful head toward the glowing constellation. Its brilliant white scales reflected the silver light until it seemed almost woven from the night sky itself. Without making a sound, the magnificent guardian slowly coiled around the roots of the flowering tree. As it did, countless blossoms opened at once, releasing shimmering petals that drifted through the air like tiny lanterns. One delicate petal landed upon the silver mark hidden on the back of my hand. Instantly, warmth spread gently through my entire body. It was not overwhelming. It felt comforting, like returning home after a journey I had forgotten I had begun. The silver mark expanded into an elegant pattern resembling intertwining branches, flowing rivers, and a serpent encircling a single blooming flower. Cashin noticed the change immediately. He stepped closer, studying the glowing design with quiet wonder rather than alarm. "It is changing," he whispered. Before I could answer, the ancient tree responded. Its enormous trunk shimmered softly, revealing hidden symbols carved beneath centuries of living bark. One by one, they illuminated until an entire mural emerged across the tree's surface. It depicted the divine serpent beside a young figure crowned not with gold, but with flowering branches. Around them stood guardians from every family, not kneeling before a ruler, but standing together in a perfect circle. No throne appeared anywhere in the carving. No armies. No banners of conquest. Only people joined by trust. The calm voice from within the sanctuary returned, quieter than before, yet somehow clearer. The sacred light was never created to separate kings from common people. It exists to remind every generation that dignity belongs equally to every soul. Those words settled deeply within my heart. I finally understood why the forgotten Omega had been erased from history. A world built upon status could never understand a leader whose greatest gift was making everyone else feel equally valued. Cashin slowly looked toward the mural, before turning back to me. "Everything I was taught about greatness feels incomplete now," he admitted. I smiled gently. Perhaps greatness was never meant to stand above others. He returned the smile with unmistakable sincerity. Perhaps it was always meant to walk beside them. At that very moment, the constellation above the valley brightened once more. A single beam of silver light descended peacefully into the center of the sanctuary, touching neither the divine serpent nor the ancient tree. Instead, it rested between Cashin and me. The light gradually formed a transparent gateway through which another landscape became visible. Beyond it stretched an endless garden filled with silver rivers, white forests, and crystal bridges reaching toward a horizon unlike any kingdom preserved upon the ancient maps. The elderly caretaker quietly lowered her head with visible emotion. "The Garden of Origins," she whispered. "Even our oldest records believed it existed only as a promise." The divine serpent gently raised its head and looked toward us with calm golden eyes, as though patiently waiting for a choice only we could make. I realized then that every forgotten truth we had uncovered had not been leading us toward greater power. It had been guiding us toward the place where compassion itself had first been entrusted to humanity, and the path beyond the sanctuary had finally opened because we had learned that the purest strength is not found in ruling the world, but in choosing one another despite every reason to turn away. The radiant gateway remained open beneath the silver constellation, its gentle light flowing across the sanctuary like the first sunrise of a new age. Cassian and I stood together before the entrance while the Divine Serpent quietly watched from beneath the flowering tree. Neither of us spoke. Somehow, we both understood that crossing the threshold would not grant unimaginable power or hidden authority. It would simply reveal the beginning of a promise that humanity had almost forgotten. As we stepped forward together, the world around us transformed into a breathtaking landscape unlike anything preserved within the ancient chronicles. Endless white forests stretched beneath a sky, filled with living constellations. Crystal rivers reflected every star without a single ripple, and graceful bridges connected peaceful gardens where blossoms glowed with soft silver light. The air itself carried a comforting warmth that seemed to welcome every living soul without distinction. At the center of the endless garden stood a simple circular pavilion surrounded by 12 flowering trees. There were no thrones, no crowns, and no symbols of conquest. Resting upon a stone table lay an open book whose pages turned gently without any wind. As we approached, elegant silver words slowly appeared across the blank paper. The first kingdom was never a place. It was a promise shared between those who chose compassion before fear. The moment I finished reading, every sanctuary we had visited, every forgotten memory we had restored, and every mystery we had uncovered finally came together with perfect clarity. The lost prince had never been chosen to rule a nation. The guardian had never been created to defend a throne. Their true purpose had always been to protect the simple truth that every person deserves dignity, kindness, and hope regardless of birth, title, or status. The Divine Serpent gently approached the open book before lowering its head in peaceful reverence. A single silver scale drifted softly onto the final page, where it transformed into a beautiful emblem combining a blooming flower, flowing branches, and a circle of connected stars. At that exact moment, the silver mark on the back of my hand faded into the same symbol, no longer glowing because it had become part of who I truly was. Cassian quietly smiled as he watched the transformation. "The journey never changed you into someone else," he said softly. "It helped you remember the person you were always meant to become." I looked toward him with quiet gratitude. Neither of us reached this place alone. We returned to the kingdom not as rulers carrying secret power, but as two people determined to preserve what we had learned. Together we transformed the hidden sanctuaries into places where scholars, healers, teachers, artists, and travelers could freely share knowledge with one another. The Royal Library opened its forgotten archives so history would never again be rewritten by fear. The valleys once hidden from the world welcomed visitors from every community, allowing old divisions to slowly disappear through understanding rather than force. The Divine Serpent continued to appear only when hope needed gentle guidance, never demanding attention and never asking for recognition. Years later, children growing beneath the flowering trees no longer asked who possessed the greatest strength. They asked how they could become kinder neighbors, wiser friends, and more compassionate leaders. Looking across the peaceful kingdom one quiet evening, Cassian gently reached for my hand as the silver constellation slowly rose above the horizon once again. This time its light no longer pointed toward another forgotten sanctuary. Instead, it spread peacefully across the entire sky, connecting every village, every family, and every heart beneath its gentle glow. Deep within the oldest flowering tree, however, one final crystal quietly awakened, revealing the faint outline of a distant world beyond even the Garden of Origins. We shared a knowing smile without taking another step, understanding that some mysteries were never meant to end. They existed to remind every new generation that the greatest adventure begins whenever someone chooses compassion over prejudice, wisdom over pride, and love over fear.